What is the best Percy Jackson book? Hello there, and welcome to today's video, where I'm going to be ranking all 5 books from the original Percy Jackson series, as well as all 5 Heroes of Olympus books. Now, the way I went about ranking these books was from a writing perspective, yes, as in character work, plot, and world building, but also from a more subjective enjoyment perspective. So, if you think my placements are actually mad, and that I clearly didn't read these books correctly, do let me know how you'd rank them down in the comments. But with all of that out of the way, let's get right into the rankings. In last place is probably the most obvious pick, and that is The Blood of Olympus, the final book in the Heroes of Olympus series. Blood of Olympus is an extremely underwhelming finale that seems to strive to make the enemies and the threat they pose feel as minuscule as possible. Gaia's an idiot who gets defeated by assuming a physical form, something she absolutely did not have to do. Her giant minions feel completely ineffectual and unthreatening, leaving the hero's ultimate victory feeling kinda hollow and hardly worth the effort. Our original characters are sidelined, with Percy being responsible for Gaia's resurrection due to a bloody nose of all things, and we're left with POVs from what I would argue are the least compelling characters in the series, with the POVs following Jason, Piper, and Leo. And sure, we do get POVs for Reyna and Nico for the first time. It comes way too late in the series, as their every chapter feel like it's just pulling away from the main action, as meager as that is. Both of them are also stuck on just a meandering quest that really tries to dig deeper into what makes each character tick, but ultimately fails due to their lack of focus throughout the rest of the series. Out of all the Riordan books I've read, this one is by far the most forgettable and my least favourite. Coming off that disappointment, let's jump into number 9, where we may have a controversial choice, as we've got The Lost Hero, the book that kicked off the Heroes of Olympus series. Now, my main issue with this book is ultimately the characters. Piper is terrible as a tomboy daughter of Aphrodite, who has a lot to say about going against her mother's sphere of influence, but then spends the whole book pining after Jason. In what I've come to acknowledge as something of a hot take in the Percy Jackson fandom, after some of my other Percy Jackson videos, I found Leo to be quite an irritating character as well. Jason was better, but his lack of memory makes him really hard to connect with as a character. This book also has an issue of promoting the characters way too fast, with both Leo and Piper becoming their cabin leaders at the end of the book. The Lost Hero is nowhere near as forgettable as Blood of Olympus, but I do find it to be incredibly boring, and a book that I'll generally skip when the time comes for me to revisit the series. Now, I know this is where I'll lose a few of you, because coming in at number 8, we have what may be yet another controversial pick, with the Sea of Monsters. Now, this was actually a bit of a weird one for me, as I've recently gained a lot of appreciation for the second book in the Percy Jackson series, and it has some absolutely awesome character moments in it, with my personal favourite being the conversation between Annabeth and Percy post-Siren Song. With that being said, I think one of the reasons this book falls so low for me is because it just feels like it abandons one of the series' core principles, the very thing that makes the series what it is, and that is the mashup between the modern world and Greek mythology. Because most of the story takes place in the titular Sea of Monsters, the book really loses a fair amount of that special something that makes Riordan's series so enjoyable. That doesn't mean it's a bad book by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that the other books on the rest of this list are better and hold more memorable moments and character beats. Coming in at our number 7 spot is The Mark of Athena. One of the things I love about The Mark of Athena is that we finally get POV chapters for Annabeth. It really is quite a joy to get her perspective at this point in the series, and it feels rewarding to see her truly face her fear of spiders, as well as to get her perspective on her relationship with Percy, and some of the prior events of the series. But where this book truly falls flat is in the weird, developing love triangle between Hazel, Frank, and Leo. I mean, I say love triangle, but it was honestly more of a jealousy triangle that just ground the story to an absolute halt, and filled it with what felt like C-tier CW angst. Which is quite surprising, considering Riordan's track record for romance writing in the original Percy Jackson series. Another somewhat similar nuisance was the way Riordan made Jason seem artificially as good as Percy. I mean, we're told throughout the series that, Jason is as good as Percy at pretty much everything, but we rarely get the actions to back that up. So having him just go toe-to-toe with Percy felt more like Riordan needing to justify Jason's feats than any organic character traits. In our number 6 spot, we have The Titan's Curse. Now, The Titan's Curse is actually a book that I enjoy more and more with each reread. I mean, I love the characters and their interactions throughout the book, with Zoe Nightshade being a surprising standout for me. I think Atlas makes for a great villain, and the effect he and his punishment have on our heroes makes for some really interesting dynamics. I think my biggest issue with this book is that it feels like a middle chapter book. As much as I love Thalia, the series is called Percy Jackson, so it never feels like she's actually going to have to make a choice when it comes to the Ophiotaurus. And, when you factor in the fact the Ophiotaurus never really comes into play or achieves relevancy ever again, this does feel like a rather skippable entry in the franchise, despite its excellent character writing. But next up is a book that feels anything but like a middle chapter. Because in our number 5 spot, we have The House of Hades, an excellent example of how to structure a penultimate book in a saga. Both Percy and Annabeth's journey through Tartarus and the rest of the Argo 2's journey towards Greece feel relevant and tense, with several characters feeling like they've begun to reach the conclusions of their arcs. Special shout out to Frank destroying an army of monsters single-handedly in order to earn the blessing of Mars, just so that he can transform an enemy into a snake for a chariot wheel. Getting Percy and Annabeth's POV through Tartarus really shows us how their relationship has evolved over time, as well as how they both cope with the trauma of being stuck well beyond enemy lines, surrounded on all sides, and stuck in a place that is actively sapping them of their strength. It's a terrific book that has some of my favorite moments in the entire series. Both series, for that fact. One of my few critiques is the pacing at times, with Hazel's training to control the mist feeling both, like an unearned power-up to get her on an even playing field with characters like Percy and Jason. And it just feels like it pulls away from some of the drama at just the wrong moments. And not necessarily in a good way. There's also the fact that Nico is forced to come out by Cupid. But honestly, that could be a video on its own. But speaking of books that could be their own video, without a doubt, the best book in the Heroes of Olympus series is The Son of Neptune, coming in at number 4. This book did a really great job of opening up the world of Percy Jackson, even if the world building would become somewhat questionable as the series progressed. One of the benefits this book had over The Lost Hero was that we were familiar with Percy's history and accomplishments, so the amnesia didn't really make that much of a difference when it came to connecting with Percy. Hazel and Frank were also welcome additions to the cast, creating a pretty cool group dynamic with Percy, as he just continued to confound them, both with his skills and his Greek approach to everything. And despite Riordan having to nerf Percy so that the rest of the 7 demigods could be relevant, I honestly believe that this should have been the book to start off the Heroes of Olympus series. Making our way into the top 3, we have the book that started it all with The Lightning Thief. Now, The Lightning Thief had actually been sitting in the number 2 spot for the longest time, as I think it perfectly weaves Greek mythology into a modern-day setting, establishes the world and its rules pretty effectively, and really sets a solid foundation for the story going forward. The characters are engaging and well-written, with each of them learning and growing from their adventures together. It has a neat little mystery at its core, and the threat of Zeus's lightning bolt falling into the wrong hands and setting off a godly civil war feels both incredibly high stakes and like a really good, almost safe first threat. There's also a good mix of iconic mythological monsters with some relative deep cuts that really make the world feel alive. But I couldn't put it in the number 2 spot because of the next entry on this list. At number 2, we have the Battle of the Labyrinth. Battle of the Labyrinth is where things feel like they're really getting serious, both from an overarching threat perspective and from a character dynamic perspective, with Luke and Kronos leading an army into the heart of Camp Half-Blood, resulting in several deaths. all the while Percy and Annabeth begin to navigate their increasingly complicated relationship. This book also properly introduces Rachel Elizabeth Dare. It features Daedalus, as well as some of my favourite moments from the series, such as Percy and Annabeth's first kiss under Mount St. Helens, Grover causing a panic, Nico declaring himself the Ghost King, and Rachel throwing her hairbrush at Kronos. As much as the House of Hades made for an excellent example on how to write a penultimate entry in a series, the Battle of the Labyrinth's singular POV gives it far more focus, and the better executed antagonists make this book feel tense and pivotal, with the ending feel like the next book has to have both sides leave everything on the table. Which leads us nicely into our number 1 spot on this list. Finally, coming in at number 1, the conclusion to the Percy Jackson series, and my personal favourite book out of the whole series, The Last Olympian. Now, The Last Olympian is a great finale that feels like non-stop action, as Percy goes from leading an attack on Kronos' ship with deadly consequences, to a trip through the underworld to gain the Curse of Achilles, before spending the back half of the book in all-out war through the streets of Manhattan against overwhelming odds. The pacing is excellent. The character beats are perfect, as it feels like our heroes are really being pushed further and further away from each other emotionally, before finally coming together stronger than ever. Annabeth and Percy's relationship reaches its natural conclusion as they both finally admit their feelings for one another, and Percy genuinely feels like he's grown into the greatest Greek hero of all time, as he turns down immortality in an effort to make the gods do better. It's a really satisfying ending, and if no other books had ever been written in Percy Jackson's world, I honestly would have been okay with that. But that's my ranking of the Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus books. So, what's the best Percy Jackson book? For me, it's The Last Olympian, hands down. I mean, it's got the action, the emotion, and the payoff the series built toward from page 1. But what do you think? Was I too harsh? Not harsh enough? Did I neglect to put your favorite book high enough? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for watching.